That night, in a small university town in California, no one knew that a silent young man, sitting alone in a black car, was about to trigger one of the most misunderstood tragedies of his generation. 6 dead, 14 injured. But the story begins long before the night, and what led him there, no one truly saw coming. In the warm night of Isla Vista, the streets pulse with familiar energy. Laughter, bicycles rushing by, glowing windows, students getting ready for a night like any other. In the middle of this lively scene, a black car sits motionless. Inside, Elliot Rodger watches without moving, his hands tight on the steering wheel. For him, this night is anything but ordinary. It represents the culmination of years of isolation, frustration, and ignored warning signs. And yet, until the very last moment, everything could still have taken a different turn. Born in London in 1991, Elliot grew up in a multicultural family. His father, a British filmmaker, was often away. His mother, of Malaysian origin, was caring but overwhelmed. From early childhood, Elliot stood out for his silence. He spoke little, laughed little, observed everything. Other children played. He stayed on the sidelines, unable to grasp social cues. At 5, the family moved to California. For many, it would be a dream. For Elliot, it was a world too loud, too fast. At school, he remained invisible. Teachers described him as polite but distant. Classmates found him strange, too quiet. He began filling notebooks, trying to understand why he couldn't connect with others. This gap, barely noticeable at first, would become one of the most troubling elements of his story. As a teenager, the divide widened. Others discovered friendship, love, confidence. Elliot remained a spectator. Obsessed with appearance and status, he spent hours in front of the mirror, searching for what was wrong. Every interaction became uncomfortable. Therapists noted severe social anxiety and fragile self-esteem, but nothing seemed urgent. The years passed and Elliot withdrew further, and no one at that point understood the consequences of this growing isolation. At 18, he discovered online communities where others expressed similar frustrations. These spaces reinforced his thoughts. He interpreted his failures as injustices, convinced himself the world owed him something. He constantly compared himself to others, especially young men he saw as more confident and more admired. He saw himself as permanently excluded, and that idea consumed him. This is where his story took a turn even his family couldn't foresee. In 2013, he moved to Isla Vista, a lively university town. For him, it was a cruel setting. Everywhere, groups of friends, couples, parties. He watched it all from his car or the sidewalks, like a spectator forced to witness a life he couldn't access. He wrote, filmed videos, built a narrative in which he saw himself as misunderstood. His parents grew worried, contacted the police, but after a brief visit, officers concluded he wasn't a danger. Another missed opportunity, a decision that would later be seen as one of the most troubling turning points in the case. The day before the events, Elliot spent his time in a strange state. He cleaned his apartment, checked details, bought a coffee, and left an unusually generous tip. He drove around Isla Vista for hours, observing the streets, the houses, the students. He stopped several times, engine off, motionless. No one noticed anything. Yet several witnesses would later say they felt something was off, without knowing why. When the sun set, the town shifted. Lights came on, music rose. Elliot recorded himself one last time, speaking in a calm, detached voice. Then he left his apartment, closed the door gently, walked down the stairs. A neighbor passed him. Elliot greeted him with a cheerful, "Hey." Nothing hinted at what was coming. What no one knew was that, inside the apartment he had just left, 3 young men, his roommates and a visiting friend, were already dead. Investigators would later confirm that Elliot had killed them with a knife before getting into his car, a hidden beginning that would completely reshape the understanding of the case. That smile, insignificant at the time, would become one of the most discussed details of the investigation. In his car, he started the engine. He drove slowly, then accelerated. He knew the streets perfectly. He stopped at a stop sign, motionless, the engine running. A group of students crossed, laughing. They didn't even look at him. In his mind, the plan was already set, and from that moment on, nothing would stop him. Events unfolded quickly. Elliot followed a precise, rehearsed route. Witnesses described a black car moving erratically, stopping abruptly, speeding off again. The first 911 calls came in. Panic, confusion, people running. Officers tried to understand, followed the car. Isla Vista, usually so lively, turned into chaos. Sirens echoed, students barricaded themselves. Messages spread. Don't go out. Stay inside. And for several minutes, no one truly understood what was happening. Within minutes, the scale of the tragedy became clear. 6 people lost their lives, 14 others were injured, some struck during the chaotic flight of the driver. Emergency calls multiplied, testimonies contradicted each other, confusion reigned. This fog of information would become one of the investigation's greatest challenges. Police engaged in a pursuit through Isla Vista's narrow streets. Flashing lights lit up the buildings, sirens tore through the night. Elliot kept driving, hitting vehicles, nearly losing control. His driving became increasingly erratic. Officers tried to block him, but he escaped several times. The chase felt endless, and yet it lasted only a few minutes. Minutes that would mark the town forever. Eventually, his car struck an obstacle. The impact was severe. Airbags deployed. The vehicle stopped. Officers approached cautiously. Elliot was found unconscious, severely injured. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later concluded he had taken his own life before police reached him. A sudden ending, but one that left many questions unanswered. Inside the car, investigators found journals, videos, writings tracing years of isolation, psychological distress, and resentment. In the days that followed, the media seized the story. Experts analyzed, families spoke out, institutions questioned themselves. How could a young man seen by therapists, flagged to police, surrounded by worried parents, slip through every safety net? A question that, even today, has no clear answer. Elliot Rodger's story became a case study, not a tale to glorify, but a warning. A reminder of what can happen when loneliness, psychological distress, and toxic influences combine without effective intervention. A story where every detail matters, where every ignored sign echoes. A story that still forces society to confront its blind spots, its responsibilities, and the lives that fall through the cracks. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that it all could have been prevented.